here's a riddle for you. What is this stuff? Have to do with this stuff, the light. They're two very different kinds of substances, right? Little rock crystals that we eat or use to preserve food, or that our doctors tell us we're getting too much of. And this invisible, most of the time, stuff that bounces off of things that perplexes scientists about whether it's a particle or a light or somehow both, this stuff we call light. We get both of these images this coming Sunday in the next section from what we call the Sermon on the Mount, when Jesus, looking at the community of people who are gathered around him, the beginning community of his disciples, and he gives them two images of what they are. He doesn't even frame this as what you could be or what you could aspire to be. Jesus just calls them this. You are salt for the earth. And then Jesus says, you are light for the world. And both of those images, he sort of fleshes out a little bit, right? Salt is good, he says, in the ancient world you use salt both as a seasoning, as a preserving agent, you use it in, preventing infection and things like that. It's something that makes other things better. It makes things taste better. It makes meat not go bad or spoil. It helps to preserve or prevent infection or other kinds of disease. And light, Jesus says, is obviously what allows us to do everything else we need to do in life. It allows us to see. It bounces off of other things so that we can go about our business. You can see a city on a hill and know how to get there. You can see everything in your house when there's a little lamp lit. But what do these two images have in common? Why does Jesus think these two naturally go together? Things that are obviously also still so different. Little tiny rock crystals and wave particles coming from the sky in the sun or from the flickering flame of an oil lamp. I think the thing to hear about both of those images is that both salt and light, at least in Jesus' way of seeing them, are things that give themselves away, that spend themselves for the sake of making other things better, and aren't there to draw attention to themselves so much, or aren't there for their own benefit, but are there to make other things more fully what they are meant to be. When in the ancient world you want to add flavor, spices or seasonings or salt is your go-to. When you want to preserve something from going bad, maybe in Jesus' world they don't use it for melting snow or ice on driveways and walkways, but we do. And maybe there's that same idea of helping other things to be safer, other things to be better. Light in the same way. Most of the time, we're not staring at light sources. If you spend too much time staring right at the sun, you'll hurt your eyes. But by the sun's light, you can see everything else. It's this reality that gives itself away, that is constantly radiating itself away, and that we then are able to navigate our lives because there is light from the sun, from the moon, from an oil lamp, that kind of thing. Both of these images are entities that aren't there for themselves exactly, but are there to give themselves away and find their fullest purpose in giving themselves away out in every direction, for food, for healing, for preserving, for illumination. It seems interesting to me that this is where Jesus basically starts what we call the Sermon on the Mount, and the first big block of teaching we get from him in Matthew's Gospel. We heard the very, very beginning, sort of the preamble last week in what we sometimes call the Beatitudes, where Jesus announces sort of this upside-down ordering of God's values, that God is not there blessing the powerful and the strong because they are so powerful or strong, but if anything, God is looking out for the people on the bottom, not the victimizers, but the victims, not the bullies, but the ones getting beaten up. That's where God is, and that's where God chooses to stand. But then Jesus looked at the community of people who he's gathering around himself, and as if to say, now if you're going to be people who live by my alternative vision of how God works in the world, if you're going to be the people of God in the world, here's the point. Your goal, your purpose, your reason isn't about drawing attention to yourselves, but about how can your presence make everything else around you better. It's about recognizing a small presence can be powerful when it's there to give itself away. when it's there interspersed and intermingled into the rest of the world. Jesus is not envisioning then that his followers will sort of cloister themselves off and withdraw from the rest of the world. Oh, let's not touch or be involved with the rest of the world. That's too sinful. It's too bad. They'll taint us. But rather, our presence is to be there right in the midst of the rest of the world. Exactly what Jesus does, right? Jesus doesn't withdraw out into the desert to pray alone by himself so he won't be touched or tainted or tempted by the evils of the world. Jesus goes right into the midst of everyday life with everyday kind of people, including some of the unrespectable people, the notorious tax collectors and sinners, that kind of thing. Jesus does this as if to say, this is my purpose in the world, is to be one who gives myself away so that my presence can help make other people be more fully what they're meant to be. It's a gentle presence to be salt. It's a gentle presence to be light. It's not blaring, it's not blinding, and it's not overpowering. If you eat somebody's cooking and all you can taste is salt, they have oversalted the food. The idea of putting salt in the food is to help bring out the flavors that are already there, to help them be more flavorful, to be more what they are. The point of light really isn't to draw attention to itself. This is not the age of the illuminated neon sign or the glowing LED billboard. It's light that shines so that you can see other things. In so many ways, I think we miss that sometimes. We think the purpose of church is to draw attention to church, to get promotion or limelight or attention for ourselves, to make ourselves the center of people's focus. And that maybe the goal is to get other people to want to be in our club. Jesus doesn't really talk that way. Certainly, we're called to draw other people by the witness of the good news. But that Jesus doesn't see our presence first and foremost as pointed at ourselves. There's this great line, the 20th century missiologist Leslie Newbigin, who says the church's first word in the world is not supposed to be church. It's Jesus. Our presence in the world is to speak Jesus into the world, not ourselves. And when our lives are then modeling Jesus' way of being in the world, we're there to be a good presence for other people, helping neighbors right beside us without worrying about how much credit we get for it. Your presence in the world, when it makes a difference, will be noticeable. The same way when food is properly seasoned. You don't have to call it, you put just enough salt in here, it's so salty, but more, yeah, this tastes right. All the flavors are coming out. When you can see clearly, you don't have to call attention. Boy, what a great light. It's doing what it's supposed to do. I wonder if that gives us clarity for our calling as well in this week. That our presence in the world is simply to give ourselves away, like Jesus does, without needing to constantly draw attention pointing inward at ourselves, but just the opposite, giving ourselves away. That's why our focus all this year, honestly, is about love in all directions. That's what salt does. Whatever it's put into it makes it better. Whatever light shines on it makes it brighter so you can see and do whatever you need to do by that illumination. We're called to simply be this presence of salt and light in the world, not staying stuck inside a bottle somewhere where nothing else can touch it, but spread out in the world, giving ourselves away, because that's what we've seen in Jesus, because we come to discover we're more fully alive and the world around us is more fully alive when we give ourselves away. That's the adventure we're called into every day, and we can do it whether or not we make headlines as we do it. We can do it without worrying about we need to be withdrawn, kept separate from the sinfulness or wickedness or worldliness of the people around us. We're called to be right in the mix, just like Jesus is. That's the conversation we're having this Sunday, and we invite you to be a part of it. So come, help us to think out together what it could look like together to be salt and light. See you Sunday.